education and the proper development of the brain. So what I'd like to go on to discuss with you now in a little bit more detail, having established what consciousness is, the unified field, and where it comes from, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the limits of human potential and the practical application of this discovery to life. Well, I talked a few moments ago about the impact of opening human awareness to the holistic experience of the meditative state in what it does in terms of the long-term development of the brain, bringing orderliness of brain functioning, which means orderly speech, orderly action, effectiveness in action, and scientifically correlates with intelligence and all those good functions of the brain, as shown in this chart. And the many, many studies that have been done at universities all over the world that shows that just this meditative experience in a college or high school setting longitudinally develops IQ and intelligence and creativity in subjects, especially in students, which is an extraordinary breakthrough. Until now, the concept of human potential has been very primitive and, unfortunately, very discouraging. The common view has been that intelligence peaks at adolescence, and then, with the dying off of brain cells and so forth, undergoes a slow and torturous decline. Of course, as we get older, we like to satisfy ourselves that our wisdom and experience makes up for the loss of raw material in the brain, that we become wiser, if not more intelligent. But all of that is absolutely a thing of the past. It's a very bleak and incorrect view of human potential. The hardware of the human brain and its malleability, its flexibility, is so extraordinary that the brain can continue to learn and develop in its creative potential throughout life. But what seems to be essential to unlock the hidden resources of our brains is to regularly refresh the brain by taking our awareness from its very narrow boundaries of experience and specialization and reacquaint the mind and experience the unboundedness which is the true nature of human consciousness. That experience develops the brain, and it allows the longitudinal growth of intelligence and so forth, whereas without that experience, the brain does seem to atrophy. It turns out, perhaps, that this pure consciousness experience, the meditative state, is as important for the proper development of the brain as is waking, dreaming, and sleeping. But unfortunately, education hasn't had any program so far to systematically deliver that experience of unbounded awareness in any systematic way to any student. One more chart I wanted to share with you is very striking, actually, and that is what tends to be all too often the fruit of education without this fundamental meditative experience. Education increasingly focuses human awareness into smaller and smaller channels of specialization. Indeed, this process begins early in life. In the first month or so of human life, EEG coherence is profound and awareness is extremely broad. After about a month or 2 months, the child learns to focus that broad awareness through the sense of sight and begins to recognize the face of his mother. Over the course of the next few years, a child becomes more proficient at recognizing the environment and manipulating the environment, and learns to focus the attention more and more sharply. Then in school, the students are rewarded for more and more increasingly specified behavior, localized performance, especially at the graduate level, where as a master's student, you soon discover you're learning more and more about less and less. And by the time you get to the doctoral level, you recognize too late that you've become the world's greatest expert in nothing. I remember my thesis subject, my PhD thesis was called Weak Mass Mixing, CP Violation in the Decay of B-Quark Mesons. How many of you have read it? Almost everybody. The problem is not really with the specialization. The problem is with the lack of globalization, the lack of regular experience of unbounded awareness in which the attention is withdrawn from those very confining, narrow boundaries of experience to once again restore the experience of one's true nature, which is unbounded universal consciousness. And without regular alternation of the non-specific with the specific, with the unbounded, with the localized, without that regular experience, the awareness gets stuck. It's like we become cerebrally myopic. We see the parts, but we lose the whole. And that's why regular meditation, regular transcending is important to expand, almost as if by force, expand comprehension to be global and maintain that flexibility in the mechanism of the brain to be able to maintain global comprehension, cosmic comprehension, while sharply focused within the narrow boundaries of thought and action. This chart shows what happens when you do not do that. It shows a very lopsided development of the brain, particularly in the right-hand chart, where you see the emergence of what are called functional holes in the brain. Now, functional holes are not physical holes in our gray matter, but they are areas of the brain that just aren't functioning, where the neurons aren't firing. And this can be revealed very easily in what are called PET images, where you measure the blood flow in the brain. What happens, unfortunately, in education as it currently exists in the world, which is all about the teaching of isolated facts, the brain becomes very competent in a specific narrow channel of activity, but the holistic functioning of the brain gets lost. And that leads to an imbalanced development of the brain, and that can become entrenched into these metabolic imbalances called functional holes. And as that chart showed, you typically see a clustering of these functional holes in the critical prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is supposed to be our rational filter against primitive, aggressive, impulsive, violent behavior. Under stress, the prefrontal cortex shuts down, and the primitive brain takes over. The process of transcending in meditation restores functioning of the entire brain, as shown in the brain encephalogram, global EEG coherence, and by engaging the total brain, where all the neurons are firing, in an integrated way, restores blood flow to the brain, where even severe metabolic imbalance can be reversed and a balanced brain functioning can be restored, even in maximum security inmates and violent offenders. So it's vitally important in education that the brain is allowed to develop holistically in a balanced way. And that requires not just exposure to isolated facts of knowledge and specific avenues of specialization, but regular expansion to experience our global reality, our cosmic reality.